Hi, where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments.
The air inside the Sub-Zero server vault of Quantum Node Sector 12 was so dry it made your skin itch, completely stripped of static electricity by specialized inductive grids and chilled to exactly $4 /circ/text to protect the cryogenic single-photon detectors. It smelled of absolutely nothing, just the clinical, dead scent of ultra-filtered air and the faint, hot ceramic ozone trace rising from racks of optical amplifiers. There was no mechanical roar here, no grinding of steel or heavy vibrations. The only sound was a high-frequency, near-silent electronic whine from the magnetic cooling fans and the steady, rhythmic click-click-click of the optical switches routing entangled laser beams into the underground fiber optic rings of the city. Behind the heavy anti-static glass panels, rows of server blades blinked with cold, sapphire blue and emerald LEDs, indicating the flawless transmission of millions of quantum keys per second. I sat on an ergonomic carbon fiber stool in front of the master polarimetric console, my old woolen technician's cardigan, dark navy, slightly frayed at the cuffs, and bearing a vintage bronze pin from the National Bureau of Quantum Standards and Communication Cryptography, draped over my shoulders. For 44 years, my official title within the Federal Cybersecurity and Quantum Infrastructure Directorate had been Chief Wave Phase Arbitrator and Senior Quantum Noise Analyst. In the slick, dynamic video presentations that the corporate board of the modern banking syndicate showed to international investors, my position was treated as an expensive, slow-moving administrative relic from the early era of traditional math-based encryption. The new private network operator, OmniSecure Quantum Systems, had long since transitioned to fully automated AI error correction, software-defined polarization controllers, and cloud-based predictive algorithms that treated the fragile quantum state of subatomic particles as a simple, permanent green percentage bar on a dashboard. They genuinely believed that securing the entire financial core of the country via quantum cryptography was nothing more than a matter of keeping the software updated and letting remote neural networks handle the phase alignment. But automated error correction software does not calculate the microscopic physical distortion that occurs inside an underground fiber cable when a subway train passes 3 meters away, introducing a localized acoustic phase shift that mimics a state-sponsor hacker tapping the line. It doesn't notice the tiny, ultra-high-frequency thermal drift inside a remote beam splitter that gradually corrupts the quantum entanglement long before the software registers an actual spike in the quantum bit error rate, QBER. I was the man who knew the exact mathematical weight of a photon's polarization, the precise acoustic signature of fiber optic stress, and exactly how many fractions of a picosecond a laser pulse could drift before the phenomenon of phase decoherence would collapse the encryption keys, turning the most secure network on Earth into an open window. I was not a venture capital asset manager, an infrastructure optimization consultant, or a digital dashboard developer. I was a physical reader of light, wave mechanics, and quantum noise who had spent half his life calibrating the laser heads of deep urban fiber loops, reading the invisible, catastrophic data warnings that automated telemetry was too uncalibrated to catch. My sister's son, Kevin, stood near the primary quantum key distribution, QKD, console, his spotless, high-visibility corporate vest carrying the crisp, synthetic smell of an executive briefing room as he verified the network throughput on his tablet. He was 35, the regional managing director of infrastructure velocity for OmniSecure, a man whose entire professional career was built around data stream compression, which in practical terms meant eliminating the mandatory 48-hour phase calibration and noise mapping sequence to force the quantum channels to run at full bandwidth, threatening veteran line analysts with immediate termination if they flagged a commercial data route due to minor phase anomalies. The automated quantum integrity certification from our central AI network is already locked and logged into the Federal Communication Ledger. Uncle Leo, Kevin said, his voice holding the rapid, sharp tempo of an executive whose performance bonus was tied directly to launching the unhackable commercial banking network before the financial quarter closed. Our software checked the polarization alignment across 10,000 nodes simultaneously. The error curve is perfectly flat. The network is mathematically impenetrable. Honestly, at 82, checking the fiber terminals with a manual polarization analyzer and an old analog oscilloscope just to find a minor phase drift is a complete waste of your energy. You're holding up the system launch. He was presenting my systematic removal from the quantum network security team not as a cold corporate firing, but as a compassionate, protective retirement arrangement designed to save my aging eyes from laser room fatigue. This is the precise, clinical script of modern institutional liquidation. You never tell a master quantum optics engineer that his experience can read the integrity of a wave function more accurately than your uncalibrated software simulations. You tell him he is too fragile for the technology. The automated software only reads the digital packets that manage to complete the reconciliation phase, Kevin. I said, my voice low, holding the flat, gravelly weight of a man who spent 40 years speaking over the high-frequency hum of cryogenic cooling arrays. The computer doesn't see the phase shifting occurring behind the primary multiplexer near the central river crossing. The quantum security model was engineered by the leading cryptographic research lab in Zurich, Leo, he replied, sliding his tablet into his leather folder with a swift, definitive snap. We don't need an old code clerk looking at the raw waveform to tell us if a quantum key is secure. We are on a 24-hour countdown to activate the main data lines for the Federal Reserve and the top 10 international trading banks before the global market window locks. My corporate partners and I have already finalized your housing package at the Whispering Pines Tech Resort. It's an exclusive luxury community in the desert with its own private golf course, automated medical centers, and absolute isolation from active infrastructure zones. What Kevin completely left out of his fast-paced corporate summary was the fact that his promotion to Senior Vice President of Continental Logistics was entirely dependent on launching the network before the end of the fiscal month, and that his private investment syndicate had already shorted the stock of our independent security testing laboratory to clear the path for a fully automated network conversion the moment my regulatory inspection office was shut down. The structural friction between my physical experience in the vault and my nephew's digital acceleration schedule reached a critical threshold exactly 10 days later, during the production activation of the main Quantum Trunk 12 Alpha. The infrastructure component was a massive, ultra-pure dark fiber optic bundle buried deep in the city's bedrock, engineered to handle the continuous transmission of entangled photon pairs under an absolute phase isolation. To the regional operations office, it was a high-revenue utility asset that needed to be brought up to full data capacity within 12 hours to avoid massive non-compliance penalties from the international banking cartel. To Kevin, it was the final physical benchmark that needed to be verified before the corporate directors arrived for the public ribbon-cutting ceremony at the network's new automated encryption wing. He came down to the Sub-Zero server vault of Sector 12 during a heavy, freezing Tuesday afternoon winter storm, his thin-soled dress, shoes slipping instantly on the smooth anti-static tiles near the main optical distribution frames. He was accompanied by a man named Sterling, the newly appointed Commissioner of Regional Communication Compliance, a 34-year-old business logistics graduate whose understanding of quantum mechanics was entirely limited to what he had memorized from data simulation slides during his management courses. Mr. Thorne, Sterling said, his voice carrying the sharp, defensive pitch of a corporate bureaucrat whose schedule was being disrupted by a laboratory technicality. We've reviewed the electronic readouts from the trunk's primary quantum key distributors. The internal telemetry shows zero fluctuations in the key generation rate. We need you to sign the formal cryptographic clearance certificate so the technicians can pull the manual isolation loops and let the automated system open the main data pipeline to the banks. He held out a sleek, plastic-shelled clipboard with a digital signature application open, a legal document that would completely clear OmniSecure of any security liability if the quantum key distribution collapsed or the data stream was compromised by an undetected interception attempt. The digital sensors are reading the data volume, Mr. Sterling, I said, keeping my hands buried inside the thick, deep pockets of my old cardigan. They aren't reading the microscopic phase shaping occurring behind the secondary polarization splitter. The storm outside isn't the problem. The ground vibration and thermal expansion inside the urban conduit are. Kevin stepped directly into the gap between me and the compliance commissioner, his teeth grinding with frustration, his voice rising to a shout to be heard over the continuous electronic hum of the server racks. Leo, let's drop the old-timer folklore routine right now. The software calculates phase noise and fiber stress automatically based on quantum bit error rates. Every hour this trunk remains throttled back costs the Syndicate $90,000 in delayed transaction penalties. Your refusal to sign this certificate is a direct violation of your regulatory mandate. If that screen isn't signed by 5 o'clock, Sterling and I will execute an emergency administrative override under the National Communications Acceleration Act. He stepped closer, his face inches from mine, his eyes wild with a cold, financial desperation that contained no trace of family loyalty. We know what this is about, old man. You're terrified that this entire facility is going to run on automated switches without your signature on a piece of paper. But your tenure is finished. If you don't clear this trunk, we will have company security guards escort you out of the gate for industrial obstruction, and your retirement insurance package will be forwarded to the State Compliance Board for an immediate forensic audit. He leaned down until his forehead almost touched mine. The Whispering Pines Tech Resort doesn't take residents with an open state investigation, Leo. You'll be spending your winter in a state-run tenement down by the freight yards where the walls are coated in diesel soot and the floor vibrates every time a train rolls past. Sign the clearance and let the data roll. The final confrontation did not take place on the anti-static floor of the server vault. It occurred 48 hours later inside the ultra-modern, glass-walled conference suite of the Global Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Underwriters Syndicate on the 71st floor of the Vanguard Horizon Tower, a building that looked down onto the city center like a giant, reflective obelisk. Kevin had organized an emergency technical arbitration hearing, using a corporate transport service to bring me there as if I were an obsolete piece of network hardware being brought before a board of corporate bankruptcy receivers. Chairman Geller, the senior industrial risk underwriter whose global fund had guaranteed $400 million against the completion of the urban quantum network, sat at the head of the long obsidian table. Next to him sat Kevin, his laptop open to a high-speed simulation loop titled Project OmniSecure, Quantum Phase Optimization, and Commissioner Sterling, who was quietly reviewing a stack of pre-signed security waivers. Mr. Thorne, Chairman Geller began, his voice low, dry, and carrying the absolute emotional coldness of a man who viewed human life as a simple variable in a compound interest table. Your nephew has presented a highly detailed, data-supported case for the immediate activation of the Quantum Trunk 12 Alpha. The digital metrics indicate that the quantum error rate is well within safe margins. Your continued refusal to sign off on the safety certificate appears to be based entirely on undocumented personal intuition and outmoded manual testing methodologies. The monitor on the boardroom wall flashed a 3D animation of the optical network, showing the entangled photon streams flowing smoothly through digital channels under the city streets, the interface glowing with a bright, reassuring green that indicated a perfectly balanced quantum system. The simulation is running on the assumption that the fiber optic core is maintaining absolute physical isolation under structural load. Chairman, I said, rising slowly from my chair without using the armrests. I didn't reach for an external hard drive. Instead, I reached into my old leather rigger's case and placed 3 small, heavy glass optical components onto the polished surface of the table. Each silicon prism was 2 inches wide, its interior microscopic waveguides completely scarred and discolored into a cloudy, distorted pattern by high-intensity laser back reflection. In March of 2021, I said, my voice cutting through the room's silent air conditioning with the absolute clarity of an iron yard whistle. The sister system of this network, the Sector 4-core loop, attempted to activate an encrypted line under identical phase parameters. The company computers at the time stated the polarization controllers were fully functional. But the computers didn't calculate what happens when an external physical force introduces a continuous, microscopic acoustic vibration into a dark fiber cable. They didn't calculate the physical phenomenon known as quantum phase decoherence. Kevin slammed his hand onto the table, the glass cups rattling against the granite trim. The 2021 incident involved old first-generation fiber systems. LEO, Sector 12 uses an advanced hollow-core silica cable that was formulated and certified by our technical team last month. The cable was certified in a static underground test vault, Kevin, I replied, looking directly at Chairman Geller, whose eyes had shifted from the simulation screen down to the cloudy, distorted silicon components on his table. Your installation crew didn't realize that the heavy construction sequence near the river crossing yesterday morning didn't just clear the tunnel. It cracked the structural shielding on the main fiber conduit. That phase distortion on those glass prisms isn't normal wear. It's the result of rapid acoustic leakage altering the refractive index of the glass. Your automated system is reading the key rate as stable because the software is aggressively expanding its error correction matrix to compensate. It's not a functioning secure line. It's a cryptographic time bomb. I pointed out the window toward the gray silhouette of the city streets below. Right now, the physical vibration leaking into that compromised conduit is altering the quantum state of the photons at an exponential rate. Because your sensors are calibrated to read digital packet delivery rather than the raw wave phase along the physical fiber walls, your software thinks the system is balanced. The moment you force those automated routers to full commercial capacity, the sudden data load wave won't stabilize the line. It will cause an instantaneous quantum state collapse. The entire encryption key system will instantly fail, exposing every financial transaction, every Federal Reserve transfer, and every secure state communication to immediate, unencrypted interception by anyone tapping the public network, destroying the Syndicate's security reputation permanently. In the science of quantum optics and physics, there is an absolute physical boundary known as the critical decoherence threshold, the exact thermodynamic and mechanical limit where external physical noise completely destroys the quantum state of a photon, neutralizing its entanglement and turning a perfectly secure quantum key into random, completely predictable digital garbage within a fraction of a picosecond. It is a physical reality that cannot be negotiated by an executive board vote, amended by an insurance syndicate, or hidden behind a corporate presentation on a screen. I pulled a small, water-damaged blue ledger from my inside pocket, the original 2021 Quantum Infrastructure Failure and Wave Phase Security Registry, certified by the National Bureau of Standards and bearing the permanent restrictive stamp Quantum Critical Exclusion Number 914 Decoherence. It was a physical document that existed entirely outside the company's cloud network, an original federal safety mandate that could not be deleted by an IT update or overridden by a corporate development waiver. Under Section 42 of the Federal Electronic Security Act, I said, placing the ledger directly over Kevin's laptop keyboard, any quantum key distribution system that exhibits evidence of structural phase drift or acoustic leakage along the physical fiber line cannot be granted an international safety clearance for commercial operation without a full physical optical time domain reflectometry test and manual polarization realignment along the entire distribution path. The exclusion on this specific urban zone is still active, gentlemen. I never cleared it, and the Federal Standards Board never rescinded it. The boardroom became completely devoid of sound, save for the faint, high-altitude creak of the glass wall as a fresh wind gust hit the building. Chairman Geller leaned forward, his manicured fingers lifting the old manual from the keyboard. He flipped to the page with the crimson stamp, his eyes scanning the technical signatures from 5 years ago with a cold, absolute focus. Is this safety exclusion active in the National Regulatory Archive, Sterling? Geller asked, his voice dropping into a razor-thin whisper that signaled the immediate termination of his professional patience. Sterling's face had turned an ashen, translucent white. He was tapping his tablet screen with desperate speed, his fingers slipping on the smooth glass. I don't have access to the pre-digital regulatory files from the central office. Our system, it only displays the active commercial operational updates from 2024 onward. The physical laws of quantum mechanics don't live in your cloud system, Sterling, I said, taking my manual back from the insurance chairman's desk. They live in the safe at the Sector 12 office. If your corporate team forces those routers tonight before that exclusion is legally resolved, your insurance syndicate will be fully liable for every dollar lost and every leak state secret when that encryption network collapses. Chairman Geller closed his leather portfolio with a sharp, definitive thud that sounded like a pistol shot in the silent boardroom. The insurance clearance for the OmniSecure project is formally revoked, effective immediately. Shut down the automated routers. Get the optical engineering crews back onto the floor and isolate that fiber conduit before the phase completely collapses. Kevin stood up, his face a distorted mask of panic and corporate fury, his executive composure completely shattered. Uncle Leo, you old lunatic, you've ruined us. The investment syndicate, they will call the primary manufacturing bonds tomorrow morning. We've already leveraged our entire corporate capital account against the completion timeline. If that certificate is frozen, we're completely bankrupt by Friday. I didn't leverage your capital against an unverified fiber conduit, Kevin. Your own arrogance did, I said, packing my distorted glass prisms back into my case. You assumed that because an old analyst spent his life reading raw waveforms in a cold concrete vault, his knowledge was obsolete and his codebooks were garbage. But a quantum analyst's job is to read the reality of the wave function, not the profit of the buyer. The financial collapse of OmniSecure quantum systems was not a gradual decline. It was a sudden, vertical liquidation that erased the company from the National Technology Registry within 90 days. The Federal Communication Board and the International Banking Cartel withdrew their multi-million-dollar operational agreements within 48 hours of the federal engineering team, confirming the massive acoustic leakage and wave phase degradation along the Sector 12 fiber trunk. The cost of running an emergency underground shielding program, manual realignment of the polarization splitters, and rebuilding the cryogenic stabilization blocks exceeded $54 million. A capital expenditure that made the entire quantum network project completely toxic to institutional investors. Without the expected delivery bonus from the operational timeline to clear their outstanding secondary credit lines, Kevin's partnership filed for Chapter 7 liquidation before the winter snow had closed the city transport routes. His luxury corporate sedan was towed out of his suburban driveway in mid-January. A quiet financial repossession witnessed only by the local municipal sanitation workers who watched the bank's agents load it onto a flatbed truck in the gray morning slush. Kevin called the server vault house line once during the spring thaw, his voice hollow, flat, and completely stripped of his former corporate cadence. He spoke for less than 2 minutes, asking if I could use my standing as a lifetime member of the Cybersecurity Inspectors Union to help him secure an entry-level position as an assistant fiber splice tester on the low-priority municipal agricultural networks in the Southern Flats. I told him that the agricultural networks were using automated satellite links now, and that the computers had no operational space for an executive who didn't understand how to read the physical phase of a communication line. I was not moved to the Whispering Pines Tech Resort. The National Security Board quietly canceled my retirement notice the following Monday afternoon. They realized that without my specific physical understanding of quantum wave dynamics and the undigitized phase exclusion acts, they couldn't certify a single encrypted terminal in the country without risking a data disaster that would void their national security policy. They created a permanent position for me, Chief Quantum Integrity Arbitrator and Subsurface Communication Security Custodian for the Federal District. My salary is now paid directly out of the nation's core industrial security account, more than enough to keep my office warm through the winter storms without ever needing to look at a corporate senior community brochure. I still sit on my high-carbon stool in the server vault of Sector 12, watching the digital telemetry lines flicker on the automated piezometer screens below. The quantum conduits operate under my supervision now, their wave phase boundaries cross-checked every morning against my manual oscilloscopes, and the encrypted photon streams leave the floor at a slow, measured pace. Their transmission velocity kept strictly below the critical threshold until the underground fiber matrix has found its perfect, permanent balance within the shield. The younger generation operates under the dangerous, modern delusion that technology is the same thing as control, and that a three-dimensional animation can force the photon to ignore the laws of physics. They believe that success is a matter of simply accelerating the schedule and erasing the manual safety margins of the past to maximize a quarterly return. But they do not understand that the wave function does not look at your investment targets, and the quantum phase does not care about your promotion timeline. Every commercial empire, every digital fortune, and every family dynamic is ultimately subject to the physical limits of the material below. My nephew thought he was optimizing a slow asset when he tried to clear away my experience and force me out of the server station. He didn't have the functional capacity to understand that the old, quiet man he viewed as an operational bottleneck was the only structural anchor keeping his entire world from being torn apart by the weight of the expanding phase noise. In the end, he wasn't defeated by a family feud or an elaborate legal conspiracy. He was simply broken by the unyielding laws of the critical decoherence threshold he refused to believe was real.